Is it ever okay for a government to ban books? Some books, specific titles. Is it ever okay for a government to say, hey, listen, we're not going to allow a certain book? What if it has to do with schools? What if it has to do with the books that are in school libraries? Well, fascinating story happening in Alberta because the government in Alberta, they sent out a ministerial order to school boards in the province. And the ministerial order told the school boards, hey, you need to take out from your libraries books that are sexually explicit. Okay? That was the wording used. They didn't want any sexually explicit books in the libraries. Well, some of the school boards there, the Edmonton School Board decided, okay, government, we don't like what you're doing. Here's what we'll do. We're going to follow your order to the letter. They announced that they were going to get rid of 200 books from their school libraries. And the books, boy, a lot of books that you know and love, perhaps. 1984 by George Orwell, taken off. Handmaid's Tale, Margaret Atwood, gone. One from Montreal author Heather O'Neill. The book Little Criminals, Lullabies for Little Criminals, excuse me there. So the school board reacts to the ministerial order. Now the government in Alberta has paused that order, and they're throwing shade at the school board, saying, hey, you know what we were trying to do. We didn't want to ban every book. We wanted to ban certain books. So they say now, the government there says, okay, we're pausing the order. We're going to rewrite it so that the classics can remain. Wanted to talk to an author about this, because is it ever okay for the government to get involved with the books that are on the shelves of libraries? Heather O'Neill, as I mentioned, the author of Lullabies for Little Criminals, is on the line. Hi, Heather. Great to talk to you.
Hi.
And I don't know if you remember this. In a former life, I was doing morning show TV, and I got to interview you once. So it's a pleasure to reconnect with you again here.
Oh, it's so nice to talk to you too again.
So Heather, listen, what do you think about this? You know, the Alberta government said yesterday they had no intention to take off books like yours from the shelves. They were talking about, sexually explicit books, like stuff that I couldn't read it on air, okay? Or even describe some of the stuff. That's what they were focused on. And the school board here, not happy with it. Now there's a bit of back and forth. What do you think on that subject of the role government should have in books that are in schools or libraries?
Well, I know. First of all, it was incredibly shocking and disheartening to me when I heard that. And especially when, I saw my own book on the list. And Lullabies for Little Criminals is a book that was actually written, I wrote it for adults. Mm-hmm. But every now and then there are certain adult books that teenagers really get attached to and really love. And those books become sort of their introduction to the world of adult literature. And, all those books, any book about adult life is going to have sex. But when these sexual scenes come in books, they're contextualized. There's, you're shown if it's the feelings behind it, how one should protect oneself when one gets advantage of. It's all these ideas that now, without those books and without children, teenagers being able to access them, they're just going to have their ideas of sexuality from porn, and that comes with no context. And also, if you start banning these books, the teenagers are going to think is that I can't talk about sex to any adult, so it becomes secretive and then taboo, and then your children will just never talk to you about anything. So I was just very shocked because this is a book so many young people have come up to me, kids who are from dysfunctional backgrounds, because there's some of that in the book, and they've so responded to it and saw themselves seen in the book. And kids from all sorts of backgrounds, so many writers now who are 30 have said they discovered that book in high school, assigned by a teacher, and it made them want to become a writer. Mm-hmm. So teachers know what they're doing. They know which books appeal to children. They know what they can handle. And for the government to come in, it's just, I think why most people are outraged is because we are not like this in Canada. This is a country people come to be able to have the freedom of press, freedom to write. So this idea that the government is starting to tamper, and it's such a slippery slope, because now you're saying it's about sexuality, but then Because then it's like, is it about sexuality or is it about who's writing the sexuality? You know, what kind of sexuality? Is it in not heteronormative or in a nuclear family? So is it from a group of people we are suspicious of? So it just, once the government starts to put its fingers in that, we are in great danger.
So, Heather, and I get all that you're saying here, and I do need to point out the government has already said they're pausing this and they're going to rewrite it because they don't want books like yours off the shelves. What the Premier of Alberta said yesterday was like that it's the school board here that is now playing politics, because the school board was well aware that this was actually much more narrow. They're talking about, like I said, like I'm looking at some of these things that it would be things that I couldn't say on air. Like, I think I could read your book and read passages from your book, and there would be no problem for me to reading those passages. We're talking about some things that were specific here that the government said they were uncomfortable with, and they were going to make that decision over a teacher. Do you think there's any example, or is there's any book where a government could say, okay, in the classroom, we're not going to allow this book? If it was, I know you bring up Slippery Slope, but if they were targeted and it was only a few books that were, again, on sexually explicit content, isn't that the right of a government to go down that path?
No, I don't think so. I think that the teachers and the librarians, they know what is fine for the students. And also, why should their lives be censored? And I don't know what kind of books that you're talking. These are not pornographic books. They're not novels that advocate for kids having sex. And actually, there are some scenes in my book that you probably couldn't read on air, because there's always these sex scenes in books as they are in movies. I don't know why they're going after books when books is the place. It's almost as though they're afraid teenagers, because there's something about a book where you get private and you're allowed to explore all sorts of ideas that maybe your parents don't have, and that are just your aesthetic and something you're reaching out for, and you just want to be able to do that. So, I mean, I read books I remember I got from the high school library. I remember I took out The Bear by Marian Engel, which had won the Governor General Award, but it ended up being about a woman. Just crazy sexuality. And anyways, I was shocked and I put it back. But it's like, that's fine. Like, kids can censor themselves. That's just part of reaching out into the adult world.
So let's take government out of it, okay? Because let me take your point and say, you know what, government shouldn't have any business to do with this. What about the parents who have said, hey, we're not comfortable with this? And now it comes down to, you got a group of parents and you've got a librarian. And who should know better about their child, the parent or the librarian? How do you fall on that?
You know, that is a very tricky question, and it might offend some listeners here, but I feel it's the librarian and teacher's duty, because as a parent, you don't own your teenager's brain. You can't censor the whole world. That's why you send a child to school, and otherwise you would just homeschool them and give them exactly what you think is right in the world. And it's their right to go. And teachers and librarians, they've worked with all kinds of kids for years and decades. When we have our own children, we're just prone to being, as I am too, just paranoid about what they're exposed to, them getting to any sorts of danger, even knowing of danger. So I do think it's better for teachers who have read these books, who have engaged with these books, who have talked to children about these books. Like, everything that's assigned in a classroom and goes to a school library is carefully curated by people who want children to read. And also, when you just have YA, those children who are intellectually curious are going to be missing out on those kind of books. They'll read them and know that reading has just been something else that's curtailed by adults and spoon-fed to them. They want some freedom in their ability to read and choose things to read. And that's what makes reading addictive.
Heather, a great talk. You got to come back, okay? We got to further this discussion in the future. I really enjoyed talking to you this morning.
Thank you so much.
That's the Montreal author Heather O'Neill over there.